Great. I'm excited about today's lesson. Yes.
Yeah. I can't remember. Are these some of your strengths today?
Very much so. I've got my CliftonStrengths finders right here. Hold on. Here are my top 5, and I think all of them are in my top 5. Restorative, activator, belief, and then woo and responsibility.
Interesting. So that's really different than these two guys today in the sense of all of the high influence and the woo, the social aspect, um and the activator, which is, giving everybody the little nudge that they need, along with the belief and the responsibility that we're going to talk about today.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
All
Looking
right.
forward to it.
So there's a couple more people joining, but they're probably just a little bit late, but we're going to get going anyway to respect all of your time. So thank you so much for being here. As usual, this is just a discussion. So if anybody has questions at any time for the speakers, just ask. And these guys are both really open and honest and transparent, so you can really ask them anything you'd like. And I'm sure they'll be happy to have a response for you. So everybody can see my screen. Let's just make sure. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Okay,
Yes.
great. So our two guests today are Ernie and Job. And you guys, what we're going to do is let you both introduce yourselves to this group of people so that they can get to know you a bit. So Ernie, we'll start with you. If you could just, share with what you've done in your past life, how we met, and then your transition into where you are today. I think that'll be really good to help everybody just kind of get to know you a bit.
Sure. Retired law enforcement officer. First of all, thanks for everybody showing up today. Retired law enforcement officer, did the last 20 years of my law enforcement career at the district attorney's there in Fort Worth, district attorney's office in Fort Worth, a criminal investigator, and did digital forensics towards the end of that career. After I retired, I did some defense work as a defense criminal investigator, and it just didn't really fit my goals and aspirations, I guess. And so I started looking at transitioning into the private sector, into corporate security, and started going to the South Lake Focus Group. And that is where I met Brandy, and then got introduced to CliftonStrengths, and took the online assessment, and then went and had lunch with Brandy in South Lake, and became very educated about the results. I don't have to tell y'all that, for me, it was kind of a reiteration of what I already knew about myself. But she was so good about explaining how it all ties together. And it was kind of magical, probably for you all as well, whenever I started talking to her, and she knew kind of who I was without even really knowing me, just based off of these results. So I'm a big fan of this. My team here, I've got 4 direct reports, and one's new. The other 3 I've actually already introduced to Brandy, and I believe they've already had one-on-ones with her. The 4th one, he and I are talking about when it's going to be convenient for him to do it. He's drinking from a fire hose right now. So probably another 30, 45 days, and we're going to get him hooked up.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ernie. Anybody have any questions for Ernie?
I think Dave said, what's a Rushmorian leadership Texan? So Rushmorian leadership is a type of leadership principle that was exhibited by the presidents that are at Mount Rushmore. A lot of it is based on those core principles of belief. They don't use that term in the Rushmorian leadership principles, but it's similar. And obviously Texan, because that's where I was born and raised.
Thank you.
You bet.
All right. Job, would you like to? Oh, I just closed your page. Let me. I had it up. I was ready, and then I just closed it. All right. Would you like to share a little bit about yourself as well, sir?
Yeah, so my name is Job Ochieng, and I've been in the IT space for the last maybe 20 plus years. Um, Met Brandy at the South Lake Focus Group during a job transition. And I think one of the things that, just like Annie just said, is in this particular meeting, what was interesting is I had already taken the strengths before, but the person I took it with did not really explain the results to me. So I kind of knew what I had, but not necessarily know exactly how that fit into the person that I am. So on this one particular meeting, Brandy was facilitating a meeting with a group of us IT folks. It was a special just group of IT folks, and I walked into the room and I decided to share what my strengths were. And Ernie, just like you said, it was interesting. This is somebody I'd never met before in my life, but I just gave her my strength and started reading me out like a book. So that for me was something that kind of captivated my attention. So we met up for some one-on-one sessions. And during that process, because I was at a stage where I didn't know if I wanted to continue with IT. I had so many things kind of going on in my mind about what are some of the things I wanted to do. But the core of everything that I did and who I am was all about service. But now it was now taking what my professional strengths are and my personality strengths are, and kind of merging those together and allowing me to see that I could still serve inside of the space that I was in. So working with Brandy allowed me to see some of those things, and actually allowed me to even discover more things that I think were just buried in the back of my mind. The things that I would think about from time to time, we just kind of let them sit just because maybe the environment or I think the season for me wasn't the right time. But there were things that, Brandy was able to help me bring up to the surface. And I think when I went ahead and got my next opportunity, which I've since moved on from that opportunity, I was able to use the knowledge and the strengths that Brandy had helped me see to work in my career. And needless to say, I think putting those things in the surface and up front as kind of like my north, my true north, knowing who I am and what I'm able to do and what I'm not able to do, allowed me to succeed in that phase of my career. And now I've moved on to something else. And those are some of the principles that I still carry along. I found out that they could also work with my kids. I'm also a dad to girls, and I'm able to kind of use those strengths with them. So it's something that just encompasses more than just what I see from a career perspective.
And share with these guys what you're doing today.
So today, other than what you see on the page there, one of the things that I'm a firm believer. I'm originally from Kenya, so I believe in giving back. So my last opportunity, thanks to COVID, allowed us to work from home. So I took advantage of that space and actually worked from Kenya for as many months as I could out of the year. And in the process, we went ahead and established some kind of like projects in Kenya. So one of the things that I did find out was special needs was an area in Kenya that was not necessarily people were knowledgeable about. So what people did was if a family had a special needs kid, they were just dropped off at a fire station or a school, and then the family just kind of disappeared. So for me, that was kind of a hard thing to take. And one of my childhood friends happened to have a special needs kid about my daughter's age. And so we started talking about it. And there was a school that was not fully, didn't have the resources to kind of fully put in the classrooms. So we took up a project, me and my friend, just to say, okay, we're going to give back. We're going to build a classroom. We're going to put things into this classroom so that these kids can have a chance. And so what we did was put up classrooms. My previous organization, I was able to get some of the technology stuff, kind of put those in the class, use some of my social skills to talk to people I already knew who were in the space, the teachers from this side, So I was able to kind of connect those, and now we have 4 classrooms of special needs kids that is actually running. So I go there back and forth to see. We also started a feeding program that, family and I kind of give back to that. So it's just been very rewarding that, I'm in a space where I have flexibility to be able to travel back and forth and work on those projects.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So if we look at Job's strengths, you can see that his belief is number 1. And I believe, Job, that's where you were having the struggle before, which was, do I use my sort of futuristic strategic side and go into, IT directing, or do I go into this nonprofit space? And we said, well, you're an engaged human being. Why don't you do both? And so the belief, though, is what really has, in my opinion, driven Job to take the steps forward to actually making a change or making a difference, because one of the core aspects of belief is helping those who cannot help themselves, which it really has strongly come through what Job is doing over in Kenya. And especially with that belief being the first strike. So the question I have for you on the belief side then is, how does it go for you when you are involved in something and you lose the belief in it? You no longer believe in it. How's that go for you?
So the few times that has happened, it's been fortunate enough to have somebody to kind of transfer those responsibilities over to. But it's been a struggle because I kind of go back to, how did I first start? What got me to this place? And I think one of the things that for a long time in my life was being able, I always had a challenge being able to transfer responsibilities, because I felt that if I started it, I needed to be involved. But I think over time, I realized there's some vision that you may have, but I won't be the same person to carry out the vision. Sometimes the people around us that we have to rally up and then transfer the vision over. So there are things that I get to start, but somebody else gets to finish.
So you guys can hear the futuristic to start to come into the way he's speaking, which is, what is the vision and who's going to carry out that vision? So futuristic people typically dream about what that future looks like, and they create these visions, and then they're able to, with their optimism, really rally people behind them into, following and directing them towards that vision. And then you can also hear his sense of responsibility coming into play, which is, I own it, it's mine, I need to take care of it. But you can also hear that over time he's developed, okay, maybe at certain times it's no longer my responsibility to continue serving in this way or this area. And then he's now able to let go of some of that responsibility. Any questions for him on his strength combination? Do you want to see all top 10 here? Ernie, what else is in there that looks familiar to you?
A lot. And I think that's why, Jeff and I, my number 1 is belief as well. And that's whenever you introduced us, was the catalyst. And when I look here, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of his. So he and I are very similar in lots of ways.
Mm-hmm. And we can see, if we scroll down a bit, Job is really, really strong in setting direction. He's got 3 strengths in his top 10 in that setting direction zone. He has 2 in the sort of moderative, collaborative, catalysting people, getting them on board or coaching them and looking for, strengths in people, but they are his 8 and 10. So if I was in a coaching session with Job, we'd be talking about, is this really an area where you should put a lot of time or effort or energy, or is this an area where you could really outsource these things to someone else? Like maybe you like to learn for yourself and you like to teach when the opportunity comes up, but maybe you're not the learning, training, and development person at the company, for example. And then he has the creative self-assurance, people will ask me all the time, why is self-assurance orange and why is it in the creative? Because self-assurance is really difficult to describe, because it really is just an internal compass that says, this is the right thing. This is the way we should go. And with that confidence, people just simply follow that person. And that's the influence. And then when someone has that level of confidence in their thinking, they're easily able to think outside the box, because they, to be honest, there's levels of caring what people think, but then there's also like, but I don't care what you think, because I know this is the right thing to do. And I know this is what needs to be done. And so that allows people with self-assurance to think in ways that other people wouldn't think, because they're not restrained by the social things that we get caught up in of, oh, should I be doing this? How does this look? Blah, 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 blah. They don't get caught up in that. They're like, look, this is where we should go. This is how we should do it. And I feel very confident about that. He's got a research function with the input. He's got a one-on-one relationship development strength. Thank God you have this here, Joe, but right at number 3. You got a little blue guy in here. And then also the high quality assurance with analytical, but again, this might be an area he outsources because it is number 9. And then the high responsibility. So another thing that I noticed here is that when you have input and analytical together, those can be really strong. Those can be a bit heightened than normal. So maybe his 9 is actually a little bit lifted up by the input, and the input's lifting up the analytical as well. Anything
So Brandy,
else?
yeah, so let me add something to just what you said. So one of the things that I think this for me was such a big thing was, initially I had the top 5, but I didn't realize once, and I have them all, but when we worked with Brandy and she showed me the top 10 and just how she's kind of organized it here and kind of talked about it, it gave me insights to how to navigate to different situations. So because I was more aware now, I knew exactly, okay, I'm being analytical in this situation. This is what more information I kind of need. So it allowed me to kind of have more of a balanced approach to so many things versus initially I was just leaning a lot on my top 5. But now when I had the top 10 and I have my 32, there are moments when I struggle with certain things. I kind of go back to my list. I'm like, yeah, I struggle with that because that kind of lays way to the bottom. It's maybe 28, it's 32, whatever it is. So it kind of allows me to say, okay, fine, this, I'm okay with that because that's where it is. That's just how I'm created. So I'm good with that.
And I think another insight here for all of us to consider is, looking at this chart and going, okay, right now I'm using my learner and my input and my analytical, and those are green. Those are in the strategic thinking realm. But what if, for example, in that moment, I really should be using my relator to make an impact or make progress with this human on the other side of it? Because the greens are the greens. They're strategic thinking. They're really good in a strategic thinking type, like an area that requires that type of thought and that type of questioning and that type of, sorting things out. But for Job, he has to be very sensitive to the fact that if he's dealing with a human being, he might need to tap more into the relator part of that, less into the thinking parts of it, because the relator is where he's really going to be effective, developing those one-on-one relationships with people, relating with them, caring about them, showing that he has good intent towards them, building the trust, and then maintaining that relationship over time. Does that make sense to you guys? How we can look at that?
It does, and it's funny as you're talking about it, and your mouse is kind of hovering on futuristic. I know the futuristic side of it from a relational standpoint has also gotten me in trouble, because sometimes when you relate to somebody who doesn't see things the way you do, and I'm like 2 years into it, and I'm seeing all these different things. It's good for visionary, but sometimes in a relation standpoint, it's like, okay, I've got to slow down because somebody's not necessarily there with me. It's just, it's very interesting how these things kind of work.
Jerry, I'm going to put you on the spot for a minute. Have you experienced that as well?
Say it again. I was looking at my pie chart and comparing it to his. Just we both have a lot of strategic, and in the top 10, we're both 50% strategic.
Right.
So what did you just say, Job?
So I was talking about how sometimes my futuristic strength can sometimes get me in trouble when it comes to relating with people. So I'm personable, right? And sometimes you're working in this relationship with someone or an organization, and I'm seeing things on what it could be and how it could get there.
Yeah.
And somebody looks at you and is like, we haven't even planned it. Well, I have this dream. I can put it all together, but for the planners and people take one step at a time, that could be too much and overwhelming for them.
Yeah, I see that in business. I see it in my marriage too. It's like, my wife is like right here, right now. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, but like 2 or 3 years from now, we could do this and this and this. It's like, and it's funny because sometimes, you and I both have, I think, I've got ideation too. I guess yours is not in the top 10, but I've got ideation too. So with futuristic and ideation, I'll start playing with ideas, and I like to play with those ideas. And she thinks I'm making plans, and she's like, "Whoa, wait a minute, hold on!" And she starts getting kind of, freaked out about it. It's like, no, this is I'm just playing here, possibilities. So, is that? I guess that's a combination of futuristic and ideation, but it sounds like you run into some of that too. It's like, hold on, they're not there.
I run into it a lot of times. So I'm constantly having to be very intentional to say, okay, who am I talking to right now, right? Is this not somebody I can play around with ideas and futuristic thinking? Let me just kind of break it down to in the now. And that can be challenging, right? Because I don't know how to do it, so I have to dig deep to do that.
Yes, it can be. And my relator's at 6, so at least you've got yours like in the top 3, so you can you can temper things a little bit. But yeah, I run into that a lot.
I want to show you guys a new feature on this tool, but I also just want to check something out on it really quick. So if I go to your profile and strength rank, Job, and we look at everything here, what I want to do is look at your pragmatic, rationalized thoughts. Okay, so you're pretty pragmatic and rationalized, even though you have belief and futuristic at the top, which are not necessarily wired that way. You still have a lot of rationalization and pragmatic and like being present type of strengths in 3 through 9.
Mm-hmm.
If we look at your, let's see if we have visionary on here. Let's do big picture. Then that comes right to the top.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is a tool that you guys can use on your own profiles that shows you if you're trying to do something and it's not very natural to you, that's okay. But then which strength might you really leverage to get there, to get that job done? So for example, let's say we take Job's and we do, where's the detailed one? I need a search here rather than a scroll.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I like that idea.
Yeah, me too. So this is evaluate and assure quality, which it's not in his top 3, but if he's needing to do that, then he needs to really focus on tapping into 4 and 5, which have that high quality element. Does that make sense how to use this?
Yep.
And the dark blue says it's very strongly likely that he can do that through these, where the light blue says maybe, right? Maybe he can get that done through the strength, maybe not, but it's a maybe. And the white ones are going, it's really unlikely that that person is getting that job done through those particular strengths. Okay. All right, let's go back to Ernie's profile and do a little quick compare. So here's his top 5. Here's Ernie's top 5. You can see he has belief right at top, but he has adaptability at number 2, and then some of the similar ones that Job's has. And then we also see that self-assurance come into play. And instead of input like Job has, Ernie has context. So Job's input is information, where Ernie's context is let me go get the context or the history or understand the past and what happened in order to have the context. And then he also has the consistency, arranger, and command right here at number 10. So Ernie, when you look at your strengths and think about how they work for you, can you give us an example of like when you really feel like you were able to be yourself the most, your most self, and then what that environment was like and why you feel like you got to use all of your strengths all at once and it was one of the best feelings that you've had?
I think that I think after I get to know people, I think woo for me is like second to the last, maybe third to the last. So it's
Fourth to the
fourth
last.
to the last. Yeah. So, I'm not one of those guys that goes into a room like my friend Darren that is joined us today. I guarantee you he's a woo in the top 5 because he's just one of those folks that can talk to anybody. For me, I really need to develop a relationship with you before I open up completely. And when I do, then great things get to happen because I refer to it as a bank of trust, and you're constantly putting coins in this bank, trust coins in this bank. And then after you put enough of them in, both of you put enough of them in, then that's whenever you can really open up. And I think that's how you build a really good team. That's what I'm trying to do here in Northern Colorado. And that trust level, as that increases, our performance goes up. I can see it in some of the data from our people. And so for me, it's getting into the right relationships. In my role prior to this, in my hospital role prior to this, it started out good. My supervisor, I loved to death. He was a great guy. But some folks above him, we just did not mesh. And it was difficult to get things done then because of this constant struggle between what I thought was right and frankly, financial issues. And so, it's for me, it's the mesh of not only the personalities, but the goals, the end game, and doing it right. You can get lots of places, but if what I like to tell people is, for me anyway, integrity is one of those things that no one can take from you. The government can take your house if you don't pay your taxes. Other people can leave your relationship with you for whatever reason. But your integrity is something no one can take from you. You can only give it away. And so I find that for me, in my personal life, that's the kind of people that I generally tend to gravitate to. And in my work life, I'm always on the hunt for those folks that think the same way I do, like that. And whenever that occurs, it seems like we get more things done and we get it done quicker.
So I have two thoughts that have come to my mind as you were talking. One, because you have such strong beliefs in what is right, the right way to treat people, ethics, which I think comes with the combination of belief and responsibility. And you're very, very confident in that, right? It's like you have this internal compass with the self-assurance that says, this is the right thing to do. This is how we should be treating people. This is the direction we should go. Do you ever sit there and say, it's my way or the highway in some ways, where you're just like, it has to be like this, or it's just not going to work for me? Do you feel inflexible at times? Now you have this high adaptability, which makes you very flexible. So that's why I'm kind of asking this, because I'm confused. I'm like, it seems like you could be really strong, stubborn, say, this is it. But again, you have this high adaptability, which is really high, spontaneous, flexible, easygoing. So how does that work?
So the way I like to explain myself is I'm kind of like Gumby. You can pull me, you can stretch me, you can twist me, and I can only go so far, and then I come back to my core. And I've got about 150 indirect folks here, and the conversation I had from the very beginning, whenever I got here, was the expectations. And I was very open about how I feel about how we treat others and customer service. You know, I manage a security guard business, and you know, that's the first face that people see whenever they come to a facility is the security officer. And so it's setting those expectations, and at times there has been failure for teammates to not meet those expectations. So instead of being inflexible, I have tried to communicate, coach, mentor about why I think my view is a better approach long term for our client than the way we've always done it. This is the way we've always done it. And generally that irritates me to no end because you're not going to get growth that way. So for me, it's been a huge learning curve in leadership in order to understand that there's a lot of people, most people, don't think the way I do. And so that's whenever I have really focused on influence and using the analytical side of my brain with logic and reason to explain why I think this is a better way. But the only thing that I'm inflexible on is the integrity part.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everything else you can teach, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, you either have that or you don't. So
what and then the second thing that I thought of as you were talking was, since you have belief at the top, is there things that you do? I mean, I know you, so I'm asking a redundant question here, but are there things that you do that you want to share with the group that you feel like you really do get out there and help people who need help and help the underserved, or like how do you do that? Because I know you do, so maybe you can share with the group how that works for you.
Well, there's a lot of things that I do that are, you know, kind of personal as far as, you know, what I help, groups I help or whatever. You introduced me to a group called Operation Underground Railroad, which is a anti-sex trafficking, child sex trafficking group. And I even interviewed for a role at one point to work in Southeast Asia with them in an undercover capacity. And, you know, that's kind of the crutch of my giving back is I help financially those organizations that I feel like are aligned with my belief systems. And so I would like to do more personally, like Job does, but I find that having 150 folks to manage on a daily basis is quite time consuming, and I haven't figured out yet how to break away and give more time to doing other things personally.
But when you weren't at the organization, people would say, "Hey, Ernie, can you come help me with this in Florida?" And you're like, "Sure." And you just got up in your car, drove to Florida or Arizona or Colorado or wherever it was, helped them out, didn't know if you were gonna be there for days or weeks, and then came home. And I'm like, that's crazy. That's like your top two strengths. That's like complete flexibility, get up and go, and just help the people that you love and care about the most, the people that you're closest to, which is the relator. And you just really strongly believe in helping the people you love. Like if I said, "Hey, you know, I need this," you'd be like, "I'll be right there," like without even hesitation. And I think that we all feel that from you, which means we can depend on you in that way. And we know we can come to you for that. Which then also allows you to live in those core strengths.
Yeah. And you know that a funny story, I had a buddy of mine who got married and his wife got pregnant, and they lived in California, and he's from Texas. And he called me and he said, "Hey, my wife's pregnant and I want to move back to Texas. I don't want my kid to be born in California." So like, okay. So I went out, and this was before cell phones or whatever. And, this 3-day drive, he had a couple of horses, a couple of dogs. She worked worked at a vet hospital. A couple of horses, a couple of dogs, a couple of snakes, a chinchilla. There were several other critters. And this 3-day trip from California back to Texas, North Texas, was, should have been 3 days. It ended up being like 10 or 11 because we kept breaking down and all kinds of issues. And he's my best friend, and so, yeah, I'm kind of that way. If someone calls and says, hey, I need your help, if I can possibly do it, I'm going to drop what I'm doing and go.
Yeah. And it feels good to you to, one, be able to just get up and go, be spontaneous, but also to help. And I can say that without even asking you, because you do it so much. You help people so much, even to the point where, you should be getting paid to do something to help them. And you don't ask for it. You don't need it. You don't require it. You're just happy to help.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I really do on LinkedIn is I put myself out there to help, other law enforcement officers specifically that are transitioning out of law enforcement, and helping them articulate how they can take those transferable skills that they got from law enforcement and move those over into the private sector. And I don't charge for that, so it's just something I intrinsically get self-motivation and value from.
Janet, do you have a question?
I do. Do you ever find yourself getting maybe frustrated or angry or drained from like continually helping?
I don't get angry. I don't get frustrated. Drained, probably, because there are just so many hours in the day, and I haven't. This role that I'm in now has been very challenging, because basically my company took over the security for 20 hospitals in the state of Colorado, with about 550 total employees, I guess. And I have 150 of them. And in the security business, whenever someone loses a contract, it's generally because they did not perform up to the standards, the KPIs for the contract. And so it has been difficult to find the time. I have not been active on LinkedIn as much as I would like to, because it's been difficult to find the time to manage all these changes that we're going through, and then still leave time for myself. And that's one of the biggest things that age, I guess, has given me, is that I need time for myself to recharge the batteries. Whenever I left doing private investigations, went to Staff Lake Focus Group for a while, was looking for my first corporate security opportunity. And I'm like, I think I just want to go on a walkabout. So I spent about 12 weeks in a car camping in the mountains to recharge my batteries. And after 28 years in law enforcement and a lot of the things that I saw and had to deal with, I really needed that battery recharge. And one of the things I learned during that process of camping in a tent for 3 months in the Rockies was every man's got to know his limitations. And for me, knowing those limitations really keeps me from becoming frustrated or angry, because I know when to say, you know what, I've learned to say, you know what, I can't help you. I've got too much on my plate. So that's a great question, though.
Thank you.
So let's and let's look down here. You can see Ernie's chart is a little bit different than Job's. Job had 3 in the direct, where Ernie has 2. One of them's the top one, but one of them's number 10. But where he's really strong is in this sort of organizational program management, project management area, especially with the number 3 relator. And then he's got really, really high quality assurance, a couple bars stacked up there. Very, very innovative in the way that he works. Again, that's that flexibility. So when, he can start with something and he might not, well, you're also very, very creative. So you might be creating and thinking about things outside the box, but then also innovating within that with the adaptability, and then obviously getting things done and delivering with the responsibility. So what I want to do next is put you guys side by side here so we can just take a look and kind of compare. So one of the biggest things you see that's different is that adaptability. Ernie's got that at number 2, and Job, for you, that's 29. So that's a big difference for you guys, is the whole spontaneity thing. But Job, do you feel like you are somewhat flexible and spontaneous, or do you feel like you are more rigid?
I think it depends on the situation. There are those that allow myself to be flexible, and then there are those like Ernie that I'm just, the belief systems and the integrity side of it. Just it's a struggle. I become very inflexible in those. Mm-hmm. In most cases, I try to be flexible.
What about because of the futuristic and the strategic that you have? Mm-hmm. What about if you have the plan? I know you're flexible in the way that you get there, because I've watched you set a direction or plan for people and then watch people not necessarily follow the plan directly. And so then you'll navigate that. Mm-hmm. But I assume your plan kind of stays the plan.
My plan stays a plan. And I think sometimes that gets me in trouble, right? Because mm-hmm. I can see it, I can feel it, and sometimes convincing somebody to come along can be such a challenge. And if it's something that I think is really big out there and I really believe in it, I can, adaptability just falls off. I'm like, okay, I'll find somebody else who can go along with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jay, what do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm a futurist. That's my number 1. And so I sometimes wonder if futurists, I call it seeing things that aren't on the radar yet. We've combined dots, and we see where, if things progress the way they're doing, with everything being as it is, these are things we really need to be addressing or looking at before they become big problems. And everybody else who's looking at the radar going, I don't see any clouds on the radar at all. Why are you talking about storms? Right? And it just throws people. And it seems to be a common thing. I know I struggle with it. What thoughts do you have on that, Brandy, and how to better communicate that when you do have these differences?
So I can also let Job speak to this, but okay, so I'm not a futurist and I'm very pragmatic. So for me personally, when I'm working with futurists, if they're not painting the full picture, it's hard for me to see because I don't see it. So I think if you guys stop and slow down a little bit and actually paint the full picture and color in between the lines a bit, it will help get people on board and along with you. So, they say a picture is 1,000 words, and I know you're an artist at heart, drawing that and painting that picture so that people can actually see this is where we could potentially go. Because I think also what's really hard is that they don't believe it. You can paint that picture all day long and someone may not believe that they could actually get there, or this is the right way to go, or this is the way they want to go. So you also, I think, as a futurist, have to make the decisions around, I'm going to paint the picture and this is where I'm going to drive towards, but I know that not everybody's going to come with me, and that has to be okay. There are other people that are going to want to come along with you and want to join that journey. And it's usually going to be the early adopters that are really going to be interested in pursuing that picture with you. Those people that like to invest and, try things out and, aren't afraid to take the risk to come along with you. So really being deliberate and conscientious of what is the picture, let me paint that picture and let me put it out there, but it's okay if everyone doesn't come along, there's just going to be certain people that really are going to believe in this and come along with me. What about you, Job? Any thoughts for Jay?
Yeah. So I think, and Jay can correct me if I'm wrong. I think for us futuristic kind of people, one of the things that we also struggle with is when the people who are not early adopters start to ask a lot of questions, right? It's almost like, because in the process, as they're asking a lot of questions, it's almost like they're wanting us to draw this picture that we don't have all the details. I have the outline for it, but I cannot necessarily fill in the blanks for you. So when those questions keep coming over, it can get frustrating to a point where you just get kind of either turn away and just like, you know what, this is not going to work. Let me try out something else. So it's very interesting, especially when it comes to you in relationships, right? Because you're talking about this big picture and how you guys can get there, and you feel like this person can kind of come along, but when they start to ask a lot of those trailing questions, which I think, Brandy, as you're talking, I was like, yeah. So those questions basically they're being asked because this person is trying to have me plan it out, but I don't have a plan. I just see the picture and I see the outline of how this could look like.
Yeah, I don't want to derail because this is a conversation, but what I have done, Brandy, is I almost think like, hey, I've got this own AI algorithm in my head, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you what I think is going to happen. And I'm going to tell you right now, when we have 3 months, that we could do something about it. You can choose to do something or not do something, because I don't have all the answers. That all the answers don't exist for me to paint you a clear picture. I have a spot in the future that I'm very clear that I believe to a high degree of probability is going to happen if all these things remain constant. If the variables remain constant, my own algorithm has said this is where we're going to land.
Mm-hmm.
And then what's happened is, and remember, I was, embedded on the research group at Sabre for a while. The head of research has said this out loud. He said, Jay's right a lot of the time. So what's happened is, over time, I make these predictions.
Mm-hmm.
3 months later, people go, man, look at that. He was right.
Yeah,
And then
you're building up that clout. Yep.
That's that trust that Ernie was talking about, man. I mean, it's like, hey, I'm going to tell you this thing that I think is going to happen in the future. And if you go along with me, you could make it an opportunity and get ahead of the curve. Or you could wait and not do anything and then go, man, that was a missed opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what do you want to do? Either save costs, make money, whatever that thing is. You can either listen and trust me. And I'm not perfect. My algorithm isn't perfect. I might only be 80%, or the variables could change. Anyways, that's how I think it's tough for people to deal with futurists, because we don't have all the answers.
Mm-hmm.
People want us to say, draw me a complete line, draw me a complete picture, and go, I don't have all that info.
And
all I have is this thing.
Can you see it when Elon Musk is asked questions? Can you see that? I see it all day long in him. He's just like, I don't even know how to come back here to explain this to you. He's like, I'm out here. This is going to work. It's not about the how. That we figure that part out. It's about what we're doing out here. I love watching the interviews on him, because I'm like, I know he has futuristic as a top strength. I can see it all day long with the way he thinks and the way that he has to process, like, what is this question that they're asking and why are they asking it and how am I supposed to answer? Because it doesn't make sense to me. Because, people are trying to understand how he knows, what he's going to be doing next. And it doesn't match up necessarily to what's happening now. So it's difficult for them to come along. Ernie, you have context, which is the complete opposite. And if we scroll down, you probably see Job has context at 30, where you have it in your, number 7 here, which is not thinking necessarily about 5, 10, 15 years down the road and planning for that and envisioning it, but rather understanding what has happened, understanding the history, and then using that knowledge and information to make decisions today. Do you want to share anything else on that one, since we have the futurists in here, and then we might have other contextuals as well?
You know, the only thing I can say about that one is I think that kind of goes hand in hand with my analytical,
Mhm.
because, you know, I'm a facts kind of person, and probably not as, I don't make decisions based on emotion.
Mhm.
I, I'm try to make decisions based
See
on
where that
facts.
empathy is. Yeah, empathy is 22. Making decisions based on emotion would have empathy much higher.
Yeah, so I think they go together. And uh, what is it? What's the saying? Past performance is a good predictor of future performance. And so I think knowing the history of things, and maybe why some things occurred the way they did.
And the why is the analytical, everybody. The why is coming from here.
Yeah, and so, you know, and that probably came from, and probably why criminal investigations was such a good role for me, because I think my empathy is actually higher uh, than what this reflects. Or maybe as I have gotten older, my empathy has changed a little. You know, I'm not sure, but
And remember, Ernie, empathy is not caring about people. Your
right.
relator cares deeply about people. It always has. So empathy is not associated with caring about people. It's more about, like, do you want to talk about feelings all day?
No.
So, that's what we're talking about. High empaths, the answer would have been, hell yeah, that's all I want to talk about. And I want to explore that and talk about it and feel it and deal with it. If that's not in your tool repertoire, that just means that aspect of how much time you want to spend on that thing is a bit lower.
Yeah, four of my top 10 are in the execution side. So I'm one of those, let's get stuff done.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, for context, for me, it's kind of understanding why things are the way they are, and then working to improve them.
And we've got also a high consistency factor for you. Job's is 27. So that's a difference. And I also see strategic is really high for Job, which when you have strategic and futuristic together, guys, that really heightens, those intensify when you have those two together. So although they both have analytical, they're down in the weeds asking who, what, where, when, why, how. And they both have an intensifier on that analytical, which is the input context. Then we have, again, Job having more of that setting direction piece because he has that futuristic, self-assurance, strategic belief, all of those, where Ernie's a little bit more detail oriented in the organization piece and the quality assurance side.
I think if Job and I worked together, he would set the direction for where we're going, and he'd point the boat in the direction he wanted to go, and I'd make sure the boat got there on time, under budget.
Yes, and I think that you guys would actually work really well together if your beliefs are similar, right, and you believe in the same things, and you're both wanting to head in the right direction. I think in the same direction, because you are both directive enough that if one or the other wanted to go a different way, you wouldn't stay on the same boat. But I could see that, where you could take a really good leader and good direction and then really execute upon that. And I think Job's really good at giving you the autonomy to do that as well. I've seen him work with his crew, and he is all about giving people the reins and letting them grow through their careers without micromanaging them. And so, yeah, you guys, and the thing that also works well between you is if you can relate, which is the relator, because if you can't relate and you both have a need to relate, that's a problem. But if you can relate and you're going in the same direction, then you guys have enough connectors, right? Like context and input is a connector. It's a different strength, but they work well together. And so you have enough connectors, but you also have enough disconnectors, things that are different, that then makes you to add value to the team if you guys were a team. So there's a lot of potential in a partnership between the two of you. If you guys were working together at the same company on the same team,
So
What else?
They both have responsibility really high.
Yeah. So this strength or this session is focused on the fact that they both had belief, responsibility, and relator, all three in the same top 5. Oh, and I wanted to show you guys this. So here's the belief, responsibility, relator. It's got the 2s next to it. If I select the top 10, you can see that's where they add the self-assurance and the analytical as well. So they actually have 5 out of their top 10 strengths that are very similar.
Good job, Joe.
Yeah, I know, right?
Let's climb
Yeah.
down here. I want to kind of see, you could see the orange is lower for Ernie. You know, you have 3 up here, which makes you really strong in these 3. Less of the orange anywhere else. Job's got lots of blue down here and then kind of speckled. So Job is really depending on that relator. You both, you know, Job's depending on the relator for relationship building, and Ernie, you're depending really on adaptability and relator. So you guys can think of it like this. This is just the way you come at building relationships, you know, the main way that you do it. Some people are going to come at building relationships 5 different ways. You guys are coming at it very specifically with 1 way or 2 ways, where like Job is coming at strategic thinking 5 different ways. And Ernie's coming at execution 4 different ways. And that's why you guys are stronger in those areas, because you're not just coming at it 1 way, you're coming at it multiple ways. Anything else? We got woo in the bottom for both of y'all. So that must be an opposite of relator. Inclusion is pretty low for both of you too. That's not a primary goal in you guys' mind, to make sure everyone feels all included.
Achiever, he's 21 and I'm 23.
Yeah, you guys are a little bit lower on the achiever, you know, and that's, you know, just making the list, checking them off, getting things over the finish line. But you guys are taking care of that with your responsibility. And that just means when you make a commitment, you keep it, you get it done, you deliver. So you're just coming at it a different way than an achiever. Sorry?
Does that also mean that ego is not really part of how they make decision making? It's
Ego
about
is
doing the
completely
right
separate
thing.
than strengths. So I've had every single strength in the book, and I've had ego in certain people and then less ego in other people. I think it's a completely different lesson actually than strengths.
Interesting.
And activator, both of us are both kind of low on activator.
Yeah, that's true. Just, you know, but we had someone in the group here today. I don't know if he's still on the call or not. Yeah, Dave,
I'm still here. Yes.
Do you go by David or Dave? I want to call you the right name.
David, not Dave, not Davey, David.
Okay, David. I'm glad I asked.
Yes.
So David has activator and woo really high. You don't have relator high though, right? You just had belief and responsibility high.
Correct.
Right. So his relator will probably be a bit low because his woo is so high. Because woo is all about being social. Relator is interacting with people one-on-one. And sometimes people will have both, but it's more rare to have that. And I see another difference here too. This maximizer is really low on Ernie. So he's not necessarily sitting there looking for top talent and driving towards it and striving towards it. He's more of a restorative person that's going to look for problems to solve, where Job is really focused on, you know, how to take something that's already really elite and then taking it to that next level. So, all right. Is there anything else anybody wanted to share today, or any questions that anybody else has before we close this up?
Do you find clusterizing, like, I know I've only had a chance to attend a couple sessions, but are you seeing a lot of clusters that tend to gravitate if people like have futuristic or strategy, that they do tend to have that maximizer component, for example, right in it? You know, have you seen these kind of clusters develop? I know it's random and it's very complex, but have you seen kind of clusters towards the top and the bottom start to occur based on?
Not necessarily the graphs you're looking at here, but like, for example, if you have woo, it's highly likely that you have communication and positivity lingering nearby. For example, positivity and let's see, it's woo and communication are paired together in a person's top 5 strengths 55% of the time. So it's very, very normal to see that. If you have consistency, it's normal to see harmony lingering nearby. Now, for Ernie, he's a little bit of an anomaly because the harmony is lower for him. Normally, you would see these within 10 of each other, and he's a little bit lower on that. But yes. Sorry?
I'm just different.
We all are. We're all 1 in 33 million.
Our belief and responsibility tend to be pretty close to each other.
Belief, responsibility, and relator are found together all the time. That's very, very normal. And so that's also tells you about someone that taking the assessment. If you see that belief, relator, responsibility close by, like let's say in the top 10, you know, they took a pretty accurate assessment, because it's very normal to have those 3 surfacing. Now, for me, if you look at mine, you're going to see that I have responsibility at number 9 and I have relator at number 3, but my belief is clear down here at the bottom. That's not how I function at all. And so, you know, although you might see some clusters, every human is so complex and so innately unique that you do just have to look at it to really understand that human for who he or she is.
Do you think outliers may be related to specific life events that could have really impacted people's perspective? That if you find an outlier that's kind of out there, that maybe there's an event that happened to them in their life that they say, I now believe that this is really important, or I'm now going to push that away from me because of this event, which kind of.
Yeah, it could be, Jay, but it's not necessarily. So it's like one thing you'll see is 2 people get together and produce a child, and those 2 people are very different or have anomaly strengths within them, and they produce a child with anomaly strengths, you know, like it's 2 different things that should never be paired together are. And you have an anomaly. So it can come from genetics. It can come from experiences during the upbringing, like long-term experiences and exposure, but it can also come from an event, something that happens. So there's lots of reasons what can change the way all of your neuros, your the things in your brain.
Yeah, neurons.
It's not just one neural pathway that's firing, it's multiple neural pathways firing in a way that produces a result, right? So it's if anything changes those or impacts those growing up, or if it's the genetic thing that impacts those. So there's multiple things that can actually create the result.
Thanks. This is so interesting. Thank you for doing this, Brandy.
You're so
this is
welcome.
really, really cool.
I'm so glad you guys are getting something out of it. Okay, speaking of that, next week we have a couple that's joining us that couldn't be more different. It's Linnell and Livio Perez. They are from Dominican Republic, and they're going to be joining us if you guys want to join and listen to them. And the week after that, I will be out of town, so we're going to skip that week. Originally, I was going to try to get her done, but it's just not going to happen. We will finish off February with this time, 12 o'clock, 12 to 1. But in March, I'm changing the time. So in March, we're going to be starting at 2 o'clock on Mondays, going from 2 to 3, so that I can attend another thing that's happens on Monday mornings every other week that I can't attend without adjusting this time. So for 2023, we're going to move the time to from 2 to 3 p.m. 2 to 3 p.m. on Mondays.
Brandy,
next week we'll be at 12.
The 6th is the week we're skipping.
We are skipping. So we're here next week, which is the 30th. Mm-hmm. And then we're skipping the following week, which is February 6th.
Okay. And then when do you move the time? In March?
March.
And that's what time?
In March, it's going to be from 2 to 3 on Mondays.
Okay. Got it.
Okay. And all of this is communicated on LinkedIn. You just look at my profile, look at my posts, and you'll start to see all that coming through. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Ernie. Thank you, Job. Thanks, guys, for coming. This was great.
Thank you guys for sharing.
Appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thanks for
Everybody-
asking us. Good to see you again, Joe.
Good seeing you too, Ernie.
Have a
Take
great
care,
day,
all.
guys. Have a great week.
Thank you too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.